Is crime truly rational, though? The Michael Weiner case that we just talked about, it's in the beginning of the book, in primarily white-collar crimes, schemes to defraud people, identity theft, and the like that I've already shared, they appear to be product of rational thought and processing. But what about street crimes? They're also called blue-collar crimes. I did reference a few examples. The book has burglaries and auto theft. These appear to be rational planning and objective thinking when criminals are planning to execute those crimes. They size up locations, targets, escape routes, etc. But is something like drug use rational? Is violence rational? Is hate crime rational? Is sex crime rational? Let's talk about them. Drug use. Did Michael Jackson, Prince, Heath Ledger, Amy Winehouse, and the number of other folks mentioned, they died of drug or alcohol use, abuse? Did they make rational choices? Aren't folks who use drugs or abuse drugs, there's an association that they're not clearly thinking? How can they be rational? But research has suggested that drug users and drug sellers engage in rational choice, cost-benefit, decision-making analysis. The users, at least initially, they engage in weighing the benefits against the risks. Drugs would be fun. It's a thrilling experience. And then they do some research and they find a way to obtain them safely. And then friends and family might engage in drug use. So you have the, peer perception or even peer pressure. And dealers, on the other hand, they treat drugs like a business, an enterprise. They're concerned with the competition. They're concerned with having a good product. They're concerned with having a regular supply of customers. And they also seek ways to deter being detected for what they're doing. So there is some research out there that says drug use is rational. What about violence? Research shows that criminals who engage in violence engage in rational decision making. They suggest a crime or use an example of a crime of serial killers. Serial killers are known to actually choose specific targets. I'll use the example of Ted Bundy, who sought young and attractive college women that generally lived near his home. And he did this in 3 states. And he had a MO. He would present himself to these women under the disguise that he was vulnerable and weak. He would have his arm in a sling. He'd have a fake leg cast. He'd be walking on crutches, and he would look particularly vulnerable and harmless. And then when they were caught off guard, he'd hit them with a crowbar and take them to his home and sexual relations and kill them. So maybe someone will choose Ted Bundy as their criminal. So violence, based on the research. Robbers, they're looking for targets around homes, familiar with the area, so they can escape, they can avoid neighborhoods. Robbery is a violent crime. It involves taking something from someone's person, an actual person, with force. But they're also watching out to make sure no one's around or they're going to get caught and they're going to be able to get away with it pretty quick. Hate crimes as rational. What do you think about hate crimes? Most would think that hate crimes are the result of a disturbed mind. But studies have shown that they are the product of rational thinking, at least in one view. And according to this view, it's generally triggered by 3 factors. 3 factors have to exist. There was an incident that occurred, leaving one group with a grievance over another, that there is an actual definable target group that's held responsible for that particular incident, and that the incident was publicly sufficient in that the event was made known to the public. And those are all rational thinking decisions or factors that go into it. But researcher Gary Becker, who actually I spoke about in the last lecture slide, who had pioneered the economics of crime by applying the rational choice theory. He claims that under the theory, criminal activity is motivated by the prospect of material gain. And although material gain undoubtedly motivates the vast majority of criminal behavior, according to Becker, it does not motivate all of it. And one example that he used of criminal behavior that's not so motivated by material gain is hate crime. So under his analysis, it's not hate crime is not a result of rational thinking. What about sex crime? Men who solicit prostitutes are rational decision makers. According to research, they not only carefully plan who to solicit, but where the activity will take place. They make decisions to avoid being robbed or assaulted or even caught by law enforcement. And they also take that information and they share it. It's been known to that they share information on web forums and other chat rooms to make other Johns aware. So sex crime is a rational decision, a rational thinking type of a crime, according to those who are in favor of the rational choice theory. What about analyzing this rational choice theory? Self-interest versus social concern. Remember from the beginning, rational choice theorists plan and design their crimes. They consider the reward against the cost, and they don't care about anyone but themselves. If they believe that they can get away with a crime, they will attempt it. Only being caught and punished is what holds them back, according to these rational choice theorists. But not all criminologists believe this. And Robert Agnew believes that self-interest and social concern can live together. His view is that most people are concerned about others, despite being self-interested, and would not commit a crime if it meant another will suffer. But on the other hand, our rational choice theorists, they're not as hopeful that criminals would empathize with their victims, but rather would be more persuaded not to commit crimes in light of potential costs. And because of that, these theorists have formulated a number of strategies to deter crime. And we're going to talk about the next: situational crime prevention. The rational choice theorists, they argue that to eradicate crime, we then need to convince criminals that crime is a poor choice that will not bring them the rewards they seek, but instead will only produce hardship, deprivation, and suffering for them. They need to know that crime is not worth the effort it takes, and that working a traditional honest job is more advantageous. Further, they need to believe, according to the theorists, criminals need to believe that crime brings them pain that cannot quickly be forgotten. And in order to accomplish all of this, there's been several crime control strategies that have been developed. And the idea of situational crime prevention is focused on efforts to reduce the opportunities that exist for the motivated offender to commit a crime. So how do we do that? By carefully guarding potential targets, control the means to commit crimes, and monitor potential offenders. The situational crime prevention was generated out of the work of Oscar Newman during the 1970s. Newman's most famous work was known as Defensible Space. It's actually a book, but it's also a concept. Name of a book, but it's also a concept. It's a book he wrote that captured his ideas for crime control through opportunity reduction in the environment. His emphasis was to be built, tended to be built on environment and how architecture and city planning efforts could curb criminal behavior through strategic designs of the community. For example, having more well-lit housing areas, more streetlights, more surveillance, more cameras, and the design and structure itself making it more visible. And then in 1992, Ron Clark published a title that was called Situational Crime Prevention, which captured his ideas and strategies for reducing criminal incidences. And he had this craved model of theft that suggests the appropriation of property is most likely to occur when the target is craved. It uses all capital letters, and it stands for an item being conceivable, removable, available, valuable, enjoyable, and disposable. What does all that mean? If you have an item that is concealable, easily hidden, hard to identify after it's stolen, that it's removable. The item is mobile, a bike, an iPhone, a car versus a refrigerator, where you need more than one person to carry. You might need a truck to put it into. It has to be available, so that it's something that's widely available and easy to find. It's valuable, so it's expensive and it's in demand. It's enjoyable, so it's a hot product, it's popular, it's all the new craze. And it's disposable, meaning it's easy to unload. You could sell it fast, you can get fast cash for it. And this model has proven to be useful to explain various forms of theft. And the example they use in the book was the research that he did involving over-the-counter meds at drugstores, how they were easily to get and they were in high demand. The drug users found that particular over-the-counter medications would give them what they needed for their high, or they would take and manipulate it in some way to get them their high. Items such as like Sudafed, that is used in the making of meth. But now, because of all of that, lots of laws have been passed controlling the sale of certain over-the-counter medications, especially items like Sudafed. And now most of them are under lock and key. So the next thing we are going to talk about is further prevention efforts. Situational crime prevention efforts can be successful by targeting specific crimes in particular settings or situations. These prevention efforts can be divided into specific strategies in an effort to reduce or eliminate a crime problem. And there's a number of them. Increase the effort that the offender needs to exert to commit the crime. So if it's not worth it, it is less likely to occur. Increase risks of committing the crime. If there's high potential for getting caught, it's less likely to occur. Reduce rewards of the crime. If the benefit or value of the crime are reduced, a rational person would be less inclined to attempt the crime. Induce shame or guilt for committing the crime. Public shame and scorn is a powerful type of punishment. The book had mentioned that some communities publish the names of prostitutes and that the quote-unquote Johns who get busted soliciting them, and that's a form of public shame and would make the crime less appealing. Reducing the excuses for committing a crime. If people can't say they didn't know it was illegal, they didn't know they were speeding, they didn't mean to, etc., the crime would be less likely. Removing excuses. Another popular method of reducing the commission of a crime is through the implementation of target hardening techniques. Target hardening techniques are those little things we do to discourage offenders from victimizing us on our property. Examples of situational crime prevention efforts and target hardening tactics, they include things like picture on credit cards, or instead of signing the card right on the back in the signature line, Or you ask the cashier. You have to ask for ID. I don't think that you can ask, but sometimes it doesn't always happen. Card access to banks for getting out cash from an ATM. Deadbolts on your door, not those little wimpy chain things that screw into your door, the tiny screws. Car alarms, but I don't think they're as effective anymore. What do you think? Do you think they're effective? There are tons of these, right? Well, let's talk about them being, like, the car alarms not being effective. If you live in a big city like New York, aren't car alarms going off all the time? All cars have car alarms, and it seems like you're accidentally hitting the button and setting it off. Do you turn your head when you hear a car alarm go off? I don't particularly anymore. I don't look out the window when I hear a car alarm going off. Is that a bad thing? Not sure if those are effective, but there's tons of these. And can you think of any that you implement on your daily lives that you're aware of? You might not even realize you're practicing target hardening, right? Locking up your bike somewhere. If you take it out, walking with your bag closer to you, right? Closer to your front. They say ladies who carry purses don't have an open purse. Make sure it's zipped and you carry it around your arm, not in your hand, right? There are several related benefits of situational crime prevention that were originally unexpected but welcomed. Diffusion of benefits concept. Efforts to reduce crime in one area also have the effect of reducing crime in another nearby area by chasing potential offenders away. Efforts to crack down on drugs and prostitution tend to have that kind of effect. There's also some hidden costs too, and some problems. Displacement efforts or effects. This one is not really favorable, but it does serve the residents of the target area. Displacement is when crime simply moves away from the target area. We might reduce crime in one neighborhood, but if it just moved around the block, can we really count that as a win? Crime extinction. Occasionally, efforts to combat crime are successful, but only for a brief period of time. Then the criminals adapt, and the crime goes back up. This is the area of extinction. Think about the car alarms. Are they really impactful when you hear one anymore, right? Replacement. When criminals try a new offense to replace the old ones they're preventing from doing. So these are the benefits and costs that must be weighed before it can be determined that situational crime prevention is actually effective. The next concepts we're going to talk about: deterrence, specific deterrence, and incapacitation.